The Washington Capitals are playoff bound, but Alexander Ovechkin got injured last night. Dan Holmi of Locked On Capitals is here with the latest and how important the potential absence of Ovechkin might be to the Capitals' playoff hopes. All that and more coming up on the Locked On NHL podcast.
You're Locked On NHL, your daily podcast on the National Hockey League. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, everybody, welcome back to the Locked On NHL podcast. So glad you could join us today, and thank you for making Locked On NHL your first listen every day. We are free and available on all platforms. It's my pleasure to welcome back to the show the host of Locked On Capitals, Dan Holmi. And Dan, a rough night for the Caps, a shootout loss, but more importantly, Alexander Ovechkin leaving the game early with an injury. Why don't you fill in our listeners and our viewers with the latest?
So what happened in this game was that Ovechkin was going down the ice. He was driving towards the net, and the Maple Leafs goalie, Källgren, put his stick out. That tripped Alex Ovechkin, and he slid awkwardly into the boards, going about 18 miles an hour. He was down on the ice, kind of just face down and grimacing the whole time. And if you know anything about Alex Ovechkin, for him to show that level of pain and to actually leave the game, you knew it was a substantial injury. All Coach Peter Laviolette is saying at this point is that it's an upper body injury, but it sure appears to me that it's a shoulder injury, and that is not what the Capitals want right now. When TJ Oshie was talked to after the game, he said, "I just talked to him, and I think he'll be all right." It's always scary seeing Big 8 go down and lay on the ice. He's a tough guy. But if there was anyone I would imagine wouldn't miss any more time, that would be the Great 8. So here's to hoping that it's not a lengthy injury for Alex Ovechkin.
Playoffs are just 1 week away. If Ovechkin has to miss time, how would the Capitals adjust? Who would you expect would be needed to step up? I mean, he's got 50 goals. No one else has more than 25. How would the Capitals handle his absence on the ice and his leadership?
Well, that's the big thing is, Alex Ovechkin is definitely a four-leaf clover, like I was talking to the wife about earlier. There's not, the mentality in all of sports is next man up, next man up. Well, there's not really a next man up for Alex Ovechkin. He has huge shoes to fill. As you know, that Alex Ovechkin has scored 780 goals of all time, 22 to pass Gordie Howe and 115 to pass Wayne Gretzky. So he's already a Hall of Famer playing out on the ice. Scrambling and just thinking next man up, it's really difficult for me to say who at this time. I know that, Kuznetsov and Wilson are number 2 and 3 respectively on the goal list there, but it would be interesting to see who they end up moving up the list at this time. I guess I could probably give you a more accurate answer on that tomorrow.
And as far as the leadership is concerned, who are some of the other leaders who would have to fill that void on this team if Ovechkin misses significant time?
Well, Nick Backstrom is a guy that's known around the team as Dad. A lot of, Tom Wilson in particular calls Nick Backstrom Dad just because he's kind of that quiet leader. He doesn't get all worked up over things. But I think the future captain of the Washington Capitals is going to be Tom Wilson. He's had a great mentor in the form of Alex Ovechkin and has matured a lot over this year. He's not getting involved in all these fights with these fourth line players that are trying to make a name for himself. So I would say Nick Backstrom and Tom Wilson, the likes of that, TJ Oshie, just some of the veteran core on the team are definitely going to have to step up to fill the void that is Alex Ovechkin.
We know the Capitals are in the playoffs. Goaltending remains a question. How do you see the Capitals handling their goaltending situation as we head into the postseason?
It's been really tough, and I spoke with J.J. Regan from NBC Sports Washington earlier this week, and we talked about the goaltending situation. And it's tough because Coach Laviolette said that when he heads into the playoffs, he wants to have that number one. When you go into the playoffs, you don't want to be going, well, who's going to be in net? You should always know. Ilya Samsonov has been playing better as of late, and so has Vitek Vanacek. but none of them has really emerged to be a number one starter for the Capitals in the future. But to answer this question, I still think that the advantage goes to Samsonov. He has he has a better physical game. He's a better all-around athlete. The funny thing about Ilya Samsonov is he can make these great athletic saves 1 minute and allow the softest goal the next minute. So it can be a bit frustrating for the Capitals and for a Capitals fan.
No question about that. It'll be interesting to see how it plays out. You're looking at the Capital situation right now. Do they have a team they would prefer to play in the first round? And is there a team they really want to try to avoid in the first round?
Well, I mean, I think that, before the game tonight, and it sounded like if they would have won, they would have bumped up a spot. They were talking about playing the Panthers. The Panthers are a tough team. They're a physical team. There's still the possibility that they could play the New York Rangers. They have Shesterkin in net, so he is, going to probably be the Vezina winner this year. So there's no real easy games. I mean, once you're playing at this point, you're playing elite level. Carolina Hurricanes, as I was talking to JJ about earlier in the week, he said that's the kind of team that, you can kind of just wear them down over time with a physical game and kind of drag them down to your level. So if there was any team I wish they could play right now, just knee-jerk reaction, I would probably say the Hurricanes, but it's sizing up that it could still be the Panthers or the Rangers. It's still too early to tell.
Yeah, be interesting. And I think you're right as far as the Hurricanes being the matchup that serves them best. But no easy opponents, like you said, at this time of year. 3 games left on the regular season schedule, 2 against the Islanders, 1 against the Rangers. Besides the health of Ovechkin, what are the Capitals looking for in these last 3 games to get ready for the playoffs?
Well, like you talked about earlier, net minding is the big thing. You have to figure it out before you get into the playoffs. It's too late then. And then also just consistency in their depth scoring. They need to have depth scoring other than Ovechkin, Kuznetsov, and Wilson. And Lars Eller has been stepping up to an extent. And Mantha has a pretty good goal scoring touch. But that's what they need is more middle depth scoring, not just the top line scoring all the time or the top 3. So that's one of the things that they're going to have to work on. Goaltending and depth scoring.
All right, Dan, why don't you tell our listeners and our viewers where they could find you on social media, where they could find the podcast, and of course, you will have the latest updates on the health of Alexander Ovechkin going forward.
Absolutely. So you can find me on Twitter. It's at DanCaps218. And then you can find the show Locked On Capitals. It's at Locked On Caps.
All right, Dan Holmi, always a pleasure to have you here. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you.